Colombian.
Who? Suspect in a half dozen drug murders down here. Lose a lot of weight. Yeah. Looks like you two are after the same man. Look, instead of beating up on each other, why don't you guys consider working together?
Freeze! Miami Vice!
Fast cars, flashy clothes, big money, heavy players, and the hot Miami scene.
These were the main ingredients that made Miami Vice one of the most innovative shows of the 1980s. Journey with Tim and Mark as we take a peek into the drama series with an MTV feel on the Vice of Miami podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 2 of the Voice of Miami podcast. We're glad you're joining us today. I'm Mark.
And this is Tim.
And we hope you enjoyed our introduction episode. We know it may have been rough around the edges, but bear with us. It'll get better as we go, we promise. We also promise to give it our best to entertain and share with what Miami Vice has meant to us, and hopefully you'll share your enjoyment with us through email and our social media. Again, from our intro episode, we'd like to share the plots, guest stars, fun facts, goofs, and a trivia question, and obviously as well as a discussion about the episode itself. Well, Tim, what do you say we get on with the show?
Very good, Mark. We are going to get on with it, and the focus of this podcast is going to be Season 1, Episode 1, called Brother's Keeper. It was written by Anthony Yerkovich and directed by Thomas Carter. The original air date was September 16th, 1984.
For a pilot episode, it was very good. Now getting on to the plot summary. This is where we meet the gang of OCB, also known as Miami Vice, and some of the regular players. Here we find Miami Vice Squad Detective James Sonny Crockett has just lost his partner, Eddie Rivera, played by Jimmy Smits, in a car bombing. Crockett was investigating who we later found out is Esteban Calderon, played by Miguel Pinheiro, a Colombian cocaine dealer, when he meets a New York City narcotics detective, Rafael Tubbs, who's also hot on the tail of Calderon. Since they're having difficulties approaching Calderon, Crockett and Tubbs are forced to work together. Crockett later confronts Rafael and discovers that he's actually Ricardo, Rafael's younger brother, and a New York detective who's seeking revenge on Calderon for killing his brother. They agree to work together, and Calderon is collared. Calderon pays his $2 million bail and escapes. In the end, Crockett persuades Tubbs to enter a career in Southern law enforcement.
This is the portion of the show where we highlight the guest stars of the show itself. In later episodes, we are going to cover both the stars and co-stars by themselves, featured in their own separate episodes. First up, we have Bill Smitrovich as DEA Lieutenant Scotty Wheeler. An American actor born in 1947, Bill starred on the small screen on Mugabal Mary and Street Cop, and then went on to big screen in A Little Sex. He has also worked on movies such as Manhunter, Ted 2, and Valley of Bones. Some of his TV credits include Crime Story, Millennium, Nash Bridges, and as a side note of that, the lead actor of Nash Bridges was none other than Don Johnson. He also starred in The Practice, Without a Trace, and he starred in Life Goes On as the father of the Thatcher family. Smitrovich married Shaw Purnell in 1985 and has a son, Alexander John, and a daughter, Maya Christina.
Our next guest star is Belinda Montgomery as Caroline Crockett. Belinda is a Canadian actress born in 1950. She has guest starred in classic westerns such as Alias Smith and Jones, The Virginian, and other police dramas such as Ironside, The FBI, Mannix, Cannon, and Barnaby Jones, just to name a few. She also appeared in the movie The Other Side of the Mountain, Part 2. Belinda Montgomery now spends most of her time in her artwork profession.
The next one, and he's probably one of my favorite character actors, is Martin Farrell, because he always offered some type of comedic relief inside of a tense drama series. He starred in this particular episode as Trini Lopez. Martin is an American actor born in 1947. He made his television debut in the spin-off series from Three's Company called The Ropers. He went on to appear in Soap, White Shadow, Happy Days, Mork and Mindy, Alice, Cheers, and 5 episodes of Hill Street Blues, where some other Miami Vice regulars made appearances as well as Miami Vice creator Anthony Yerkovich. Martin would come back as Izzy Moreno in later Miami Vice episodes after his character Trini was killed off in the inaugural pilot. After Miami Vice, he appeared in Crime Story, Moonlighting, L.A. Law with Jimmy Smits, who made a brief appearance here. Some movies he had character parts in were Modern Girls, Stop or My Mom Will Shoot, Jurassic Park, Heat, and the motel clerk that wouldn't accept a Casio watch as room payment from Del Griffith in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. He has not appeared on TV or movies since 2001, though he is now a member of the Antius Company, a classical theater ensemble in Los Angeles.
Next up, we have Mykelti Williamson as Leon Jefferson. Born in 1960, Mykelti is an American actor and started off as an alternate member of the Lockers troupe on Soul Train. His first TV role was on Starsky Hutch, and his first movie gig was Sunnyside. Other TV roles included The White Shadow, Gimme a Break, Alice, and Bay City Blues. He also appeared in Hill Street Blues with other fellow Miami Vice castmates. He also starred in the new WKRP in Cincinnati and China Beach. Other movie projects included Wildcats, Free Willy, Primary Colors, and his most popular movie role as Private Benjamin Buford Blue, a.k.a. Bubba in Forrest Gump. Mykelti has been married 3 times with 3 daughters between those wives.
Just on another side note, Mark, the last thing that I saw Mykelti in as of late was several episodes as a lieutenant detective on the TV series Chicago PD. Now we're going to move on to what would be one of his better halves in one of his 3 marriages is Olivia Brown as Detective Trudy. She was born in Germany in 1960 and is an American actress. She actually is a regular cast member, but was credited in this episode as a guest. Being born in Germany, she made her American debut in 48 Hours in TV roles as T.J. Hooker, Hill Street Blues, and For Love and Honor. She appeared in Streets of Fire with then-husband Mykelti Williamson. After Miami Vice, she went on to Designing Women, Beverly Hills 90210, Moesha, and Seventh Heaven. Brown married Mykelti Wilson in 1983. They divorced in 1985 and had no children. Brown later married James Okonkwo and has 2 children.
Our next guest star is the big one in this episode, Miguel Pinheiro as Esteban Calderon. Born in 1946 in Puerto Rico, he is actually a Puerto Rican actor. He moved to New York City with his parents when he was 4. He and his family suffered many heartbreaks and setbacks after his father left in 1954. Miguel has many brushes with the law and joined a street gang when he was just 13 years old. Before 20, he was a drug addict. While serving prison in Sing Sing, he created a play called Short Eyes. 2 years after that, the play was moved to Broadway and then nominated for 6 Tony Awards and was awarded an Obie Award and a New York Drama Critics Circle Award for Best Play. After more success in Europe, the play was turned into a successful book. After prison, he made it to Hollywood via Kojak, Beretta, and then appeared in the movie Short Eyes. Despite his successes in film and writing, his drug addiction only intensified. Pinheiro only made 2 more appearances on TV after Miami Vice in the series The Equalizer and DC Cops, and his health began deteriorating quickly. Pinheiro suffered from cirrhosis, possibly from his heavy drug use, and he passed away from the disease on June 16, 1988, at the age of 41.
All right, Mark, now it's time for some fun facts, behind the scenes, filming locations, and the goofs. First, this episode was broadcast as a 2-hour movie, but is actually listed as 2 episodes.
When presenting the transfer order in prison near the end for Calderon, Crockett refers to Esteban Calderon as Orlando. That name actually was later used for his son, played by John Leguizamo in later episodes.
Another fact that we got here is that this is the first of 5 times that Tubbs is actually shot throughout the run of the series.
The building at 1116 Ocean Drive in Miami Beach, where the scenes of Leon's apartment were filmed when Crockett and Tubbs were searching it, was purchased by fashion designer Gianni Versace as his Miami residence. It's also where a serial murderer gunned him down in 1997. The building is now a restaurant, event center, and a boutique hotel.
Next goof that we have, if you want to call it that, is that when we first see Leon as he's walking towards his car before he meets Crockett, you can see the film crew being moved along a dolly in the storefront windows just because the camera caught that reflection.
Next up, we have when Tubbs takes off in Crockett's speedboat. You can actually see another person in the boat. We're assuming this is a film crew member.
This particular episode started in New York City, and Miami Vice would again visit there in the Prodigal Son episode where Crockett and Tubbs go to solve the Revilla case, and in the Better Living for Chemistry episode when Tubbs goes there to clear Clarence Batista's name.
I like this next fact only because of the movie. It's one of my favorites, one of my wife's favorites. When we first meet Crockett and Eddie Rivera in Miami Beach, they're in front of 1250 Ocean Drive. This hotel was also used for the 1996 hit movie The Birdcage, starring Robbie Williams and Nathan Lane. You could also very briefly see this hotel in the movie Scarface.
Yes, Robin Williams and Nathan Lane, two great actors. This next goof that we have is when Crockett is in the Camaro chasing Tubbs in his boat, you can see a boom bucket truck being passed several times. This truck appears to be holding a set light up high.
Okay, this one's a location, a little obscure. You'll have to look for it. Look for it on Google Maps. It's pretty cool. The bridge from where Crockett jumps from the train trestle onto his boat, surprising Tubbs, is located just northeast of the Miami airport near Northwest 36th Street and Northwest South River Drive. If you do a Google map search for that location, you can actually see the trestle there still.
And then we have one final tidbit. The seaplane in which Calderon escapes is in Chalk's Ocean Airways. This airline has an actual history of smuggling drugs between the Bahamas and mainland Florida. It also suffered a crash in 2005 due to metal fatigue cracking in the structure, killing all 20 aboard.
And that brings us to this week's trivia question. It's rather easy. If you can, freeze frame on a DVD. A little difficult if you cannot freeze frame. Here we go. When Crockett goes to the diner to tell Rivera's wife he's dead, there is some beer on the menu. What beers are offered and what are those prices? You can post your answers on this episode's Facebook post, or you can email us at viceofmiamishow@gmail.com. We will air some of the answers. This is for fun, no prizes. And now let's get to the ratings. Tim, I like this episode. I give it a thumbs up. Usually pilots and the first episodes are pretty rough around the edges, just like our first episode. But this one, it got everything on point, I think. It kind of brought you into the Miami Vice world. And I think the characters themselves were pretty highlighted in a favorable manner. What do you think, Tim?
Well, like as with every pilot, it's really a setup for this series. And again, when it comes to ratings, I definitely give it a thumbs up because especially when the very first words spoken were by James Sonny Crockett when he talked about 5,000 street corners in Greater Miami and Gumby here as to pick ours. You knew that this show was going to be happening and it was going to bring all the goods and bells and whistles with it.
Yeah. I got to agree with you on that, Tim. But technically the very first words were "Beat it, punk" from Tubbs out in New York City. But that's splitting hairs.
Oh, that's right. Okay, well, I'll take that back. It's not the first words, but maybe the first full dialogue sentence. And that's really the setup for Crockett's character in general.
Yes,
so yeah,
exactly.
I definitely give it a thumbs up because we just got really brief snippets about each character, especially the main characters that were going to be there for the life of the series. Some of them were, some of them weren't, but it definitely was it lived up to its billing because I remember back in 1984 when NBC was really, really hyping this show and it delivered, no doubt about it. RatingGraph.com gave it an 8.4. Rotten Tomatoes didn't give any rating, but the season got an 87% on Tomato Meter. IMDb gave it an 8.4.
Tim and I would like to try something out in our shows, something a little non sequitur-esque. In the world of Miami Vice and the world around us today, we see many hurdles and challenges. So Tim and I want to end with a simple quote, phrase, words of encouragement, words of wisdom, etc., to hopefully spread a family and friendly atmosphere here on our show and our social media platforms, and most importantly, to you, our listeners. Because without you, our friends, we'd just be talking to ourselves. And yes, we say friends because that's what we consider all of you listening. You are our friends, whether we have met yet or not, whether we have interacted on social media or not. You are our friends. So to that end, here are my simple words of inspiration for this episode. Do not stress about the could haves. If it should have, it would have.
What I mean.
It's nice.
We are gonna make it happen, my man.
I'm gonna do it.
In Miami.
Right here.
All right. And don't worry, I'm gonna get you some new clothes.
Eddie? No!
All right, this is the discussion part of the show. We're going to go scene by scene, discuss the plot points. We're not going to go too far into detail as this is a almost 2-hour episode, being the pilot. But we're going to cover the interesting and intriguing points of the episode.
No, we could get rolling. I mean, there's a couple common themes that are in here when it comes to this episode. And the first one is both Crockett and Tubbs each lose somebody close to them at the hands of Francisco Calderon, or aka the Colombian. The second part of this, you just keep seeing repeated scene after scene, is the theme of betrayal or deceit or lying, things like that. So as we go along here with our discussion, we'll develop that out a little bit further.
Okay, I guess from the beginning we could say, obviously we start with, Tubbs. He's doing surveillance out in New York, basically based off of the fact that what ends up being Calderon killing his brother, the real Rafael Tubbs, and then wanting to essentially take care of Calderon. Tubbs knows who Calderon is. Later on, we find Crockett ends up knowing who he is, but doesn't know exactly that Calderon is the Colombian. Tim.
Right, and that comes about when he first meets Tubbs on the bridge after the whole meet and greet and buy with Scotty Wheeler and Leon, where half the dealers were cops in this whole game. He get the big chase on where Tubbs steals his boat and Crockett's paralleling him on land. Right. And then they end up getting on a boat, punching it out. And then once Lou Rodriguez brings them together, that's where he finds out that Calderon is the Colombian. When they exchanged and handed that, when Tubbs gave him that photo, that's where they recognized it. And then they told Tubbs, he's wanted for how many half a dozen murders down here. Right. And, we've been chasing him and things like that. So
we also cannot forget the opening line of Tubbs himself, "Beat it, punks." And then the first, I think, even what you said earlier in our discussions before, that the line that sets the Miami part that Crockett utters is, I'll let you do it, Tim.
It's 5,000 street corners in greater Miami, and Gumby here's got to pick ours.
5,000 street corners in greater Miami, and Gumby here's got to pick ours.
Getting back to a different point, when Crockett is in the squad car with Rodriguez after Rivera dies, he kind of talks about a leak, and then Rodriguez kind of busts his chops a little bit, get on point by the book.
Right, and that's where we first find out that, he says, "You're just like your old playing day, college playing days, Sonny," letting him know that, you're not really a by the book. You're not giving me any timely updates. I don't hear word one from you for a week, things like that, is that he was getting busted on. Lou Rodriguez is just emphasizing you got to be on point. And then again, Sonny wants to be a little bit kind of like, you get the feel that he's a cowboy.
Mm-hmm.
He's a great cop, but he likes to run on his own versus doing what is expected by rules and regulations.
Probably going back to his football days, he sees the opportunity, he's going to seize it, whether it's what the coach wants or not. It's still the end result.
Yeah, and I believe
Probably
that's what.
on that.
Yep, that's what Rodriguez was trying to point out, is that
Right.
you know, he'll ad lib things versus let's go with a specific game plan. You know, when you're talking about being in undercover work, that's more fluid and dynamic versus, all right, this is what I should do next or that next. You know, you have to roll in a moment, and sometimes that's pretty tricky or sticky, because especially when you're talking about, you could be one trigger pull away from being mailed home in a box.
And also in this first scene, essentially the scene where Rivera was blown up, we meet Zito and Switek, pretty much the goofballs of the series.
And that's how they kind of set him up to begin with.
Right.
But as we'll see as we develop our podcast here, that Zito and Switek are actually they're very good cops in their own rights. They try to make him look goofy for right now, but they definitely clean up.
Okay, we also finally meet Trudy and Gina, and then we could immediately tell that Gina and Sonny have a relationship going on. Fast forwarding a little bit, we also find out Sonny has a soon-to-be ex-wife, Carolyn, played by Belinda Montgomery. But getting back to Gina, we could tell that there may have already been a romance there.
For sure, a budding romance. And I think as we move on in our discussion, I think there was like chemistry or sexual tension, but I don't think at that point anything happened until later on in this episode. And then that's where I think then they develop as some type of a couple, but more of a office romance type of thing.
So fast forwarding, obviously Rivera blows up. Sonny delivers bad news to Eddie's wife, and just when he walks into the diner, she knows it's bad. She knows just by the look on his face that it's not good news.
Yeah, especially when we get into that scene about when he's late for his son's 6th birthday party. Callan's not happy, but then he comes in and he says, Eddie Rivera got killed. And then their ensuing discussion after the party breaks up, everybody's gone. And it's also where we first met his former partner, now DEA agent Scott Wheeler. But when he has that exchange with Carolyn, you obviously find out that Sonny has had a drinking problem, or maybe still does. But the most significant thing she said about them, and this is going back to that theme of deceit, betrayal, illusion type of thing, is that she said, basically he got so involved, absorbed in his role, that he didn't know where his character of Sonny Burnett ended and where Sonny Crockett actually began again. And she said,
Right.
You're all players. You just got high on the action.
You get high on the action, right?
Been doing a lot of thinking about it.
Actually, I
And you know, it's funny, but in a lot of ways, you and your vice cop buddies were just the flip side of the same coin from these dealers you're always masquerading around with. You're all players, Sonny. You get high on the action.
And when you mention that, we don't know where Crockett or Burnett start or end. That's going to come up in later episode. I forget which season, which episode. We'll get to it where he doesn't even know that he's Sonny Crockett. He is this other dark person.
Yes. And then we keep moving forward, and the next scene we have Sonny Burnett meeting with Leon, who is, I just call him the Colombian stooge, but more of a middleman that set things up. And that's where he tells Crockett that the bomb was not meant for Eddie Rivera
It was meant for
or for Sonny Burnett, but it was meant for Corky, who was basically going to try to go off book and steal Eddie's business from the Colombian, and then that's where he got, boom, boom. Then at some point, it goes into, music comes up, and that's where you first see the flashback images of Ricardo Tubbs' brother Raphael being killed by Calderon. There's no doubt at this point that he is on a mission to seek revenge.
Right. He's got that vendetta in his mind. That's going to come up later in this episode. That's what he's going after Calderon for. That's the only reason, not because he's bringing drugs into Miami and this, that, or the other, or he killed, other people. This is just a pure revenge to avenge the real Raphael's death.
As we move forward, Crockett is on his boat, the St. Vitus Dance, and he's there with Leon. And again, they're setting up that meet or that buy that ends up later on in that evening. And this is where he crosses paths for the first time with Tubbs, who is playing Teddy Prentice as Teddy Prentice as an undercover type of alter ego for himself. How he was brought to this buy is that he was in a nightclub. He's asking around. He gets connected with
Wheeler.
With Wheeler, who sets up that buy.
Then they're going forward. They meet pretty much at the docks of like a wharf somewhere. I guess you could say an industrial area for boats or something like that.
This is where Crockett and Tubbs meet for the first time as obviously Burnett and Prentice.
Right.
And then you had the rest of the backup, the cops, Zito, Switek. They come in a little bit, jumped the gun too soon.
A little early, aren't you airheads?
Yep, little early, aren't you airheads? At that point, Tubbs takes off. He grabs Crockett's $100,000 Stinger boat, and he's off and running. And then Crockett parallels Tubbs on the street, and we talked about this a little bit before. And that's where the Miami Vice theme, that iconic theme, starts playing in the background. Eventually, Crockett figures out which way he's going the route, ends up jumping in a boat off of a bridge, and then they tangle in there, and then you get Freeze It, Miami Vice. And that's the first time we hear something like that as well.
New York. You got to say it like that. New York.
Freeze it. Miami Vice.
Congratulations, pal. New York.
So, then that's where Crockett's bitching when now they're on the bridge with Lou Rodriguez, and he's bitching about how 3/4 of the players in the drug buy were cops. And at one point he said, and then we got Dr. Voodoo here from Fun City.
Fun City, right. I was just going to say that.
And again, you go back to how he is not a by-the-book player, where it was by direct request of the New York police that Tubbs be down here. It was an interagency memo, confidential, and all Lou was basically telling Crockett is that you don't read anything, so you would have known this had you done that.
If you would have known, right? If you would have read the memos, you would have known. Tubbs, we're assuming this the next day, going to the St. Vitus Dance. He finally meets Elvis, the former mascot of the University of Florida. Yes, University of Florida. Kind of after actually he meets Elvis after him and Sonny have a little tussle. He goes down to get some ice, and then he meets Elvis.
Yes, and that's also at that point he figures out, once Crockett tells him he was the mascot of the University of Florida, it dawns on Tubbs that Crockett was James Sonny Crockett, All-American number 88 for the University of Florida. And, he asked him what happened after, and he said he did 2 years in the Southeast Asian Conference, which was Vietnam. Crockett at this point was still, I don't need you. I don't need to work with anybody. Tubbs said to him, you need me, Crockett, basically because Teddy Prentice, his character's already in play in this whole drug buy, and without him, they were not going to be able to do a further meet and greet and really try to get even closer to Calderon.
Leon kind of knows the jig is up on him. He wants to get in jail for protection. Sonny, and the OCB / Miami Vice, they do their work. They don't press charges. The DA doesn't press charges. In the courtroom, the lights go out, and due to the constitutional right to bear arms down there, pretty much all the court workers, they have the guns pointed straight at Leon.
So, basically they railroaded Leon, and they're letting him out on the street because they want him to roll over on the Colombian. He eventually makes that phone call to Rodriguez. Sonny's going to go pick him up at the beach. Unbeknownst to Sonny, Tubbs was trailing him there just to keep an eye on him. Mm-hmm. And that's where we meet a Cubano, what appears to be a female assassin, who comes up and puts one into Leon and takes him out of the picture. So once again, the Colombian stays one step ahead of Crockett. And that was one of the things that Crockett had complained about, saying that, every time I get within 20 yards of this guy, I get the rug pulled out from underneath me. And as we'll find out later on, and also Tubbs made the innuendo in that first meet on the bridge that you have a leak in your department. Again, going back to that theme of betrayal, deceit, and otherwise.
Right. That's the whole episode kind of has that umbrella over it, the umbrella of deceit, betrayal, on Tubbs's aspect and on Sonny's aspect as well. This is where they meet Trini DeSoto, pretty much a middleman. He's got a Cubano flair to him. We talked about him in the guest stars. Trini will come back as another character in later episodes, but they finally meet him here, trying to get closer to Calderon. Eventually, at night, they finally, with Trini, they meet Calderon in the restaurant, and you could see daggers pretty much coming out of Tubbs's eyes when he goes up.
And that was yet another time that he flashes back to his brother's death. So he's laser-eyed, focused on Calderon, and he goes and eventually engages him after Calderon sent over some champagne for them. Teddy Prentice goes up there and to meet him, and Calderon says, "Welcome to Miami, Mr. Prentice." Then after that scene, because you had Trudy, Gina, Tubbs, and Crockett there kind of like as couples when they met with Trini, then, they go their separate ways. And then we move on to the next scene where Crockett and Gina are on the boat. There's one thing that we had left out, which was very critical a couple scenes ago, is Crockett had asked Gene to run and get more information on Raphael Tubbs. And then when they were sitting at this little meet and greet after that, he asked her, "Did anything come back on this guy?" And she goes, "Oh, hell yeah. I don't know who this guy is. I don't know if she called him a clown. I don't know who he is, but Raphael Tubbs had died 3 weeks ago." And there's again that other adding to the betrayal thing. Now you got somebody living a lie. Crockett didn't want to trust him to begin with. Now he wants to trust him even less. So then we move to the boat, and that's where Gina and Crockett, now that tensions are getting a little bit more, it's getting a little bit more closer for them because they started talking about relationships being tough.
Right.
And Crockett used some type of a football jargon with her, and then you had the big hookup on the boat.
You sure made a fast exit this morning.
I got nothing to say to you.
I think it's pretty terrific that it did.
Sensational, Crockett. Full moon, the boat, few drinks too many, soft music, a little sudden on-board romance.
What's so bad about that?
Do you mind?
Funny thing is, I almost believed you till this morning. Nothing like having some guy roll over at sunup and whisper his ex-wife's name in your ear to boost your self-image.
After Gina and Sonny hook up on the boat, Tubbs comes meandering down, meets up with Crockett on St. Vitus Dance. This is where Crockett confronts Tubbs. "Who are you? What are you doing here? Who are you? Why are you with us?" And Tubbs reveals that he's Raphael's brother, Ricardo Tubbs. But Crockett feels that he's an outlaw cop on a personal vendetta. Tubbs thinks, no, it's just justice. Plain and simple, just justice.
This here's a flare gun, sucker. So unless you want your entire intestinal tract lit up like Cape Canaveral, you got exactly 10 seconds to tell me who you are.
You crazy, man. What are you doing?
8 seconds!
What are you talking about, man? You know who I am!
Raphael Tubbs died 3 weeks ago in that New York shootout with Calderon. 4 seconds. Who are you, man? His brother.
I'm his brother, Crockett! I know we all look alike to you Southern crackers, but not this much. Look at the picture, man! Look at it!
And then, as a quote here by the, I don't know if it was actually a quote, but Sonny says something along the lines of, by the book. Something that he was told to do.
At one point, too, Tubbs was insinuating that Lou Rodriguez could have been a leak because every time they got closer to the Colombian, somebody else got killed, somebody was wiped out, or the trail ran a little bit cold for him. Crockett, he said, can you explain why this guy, Lou Rodriguez, deposited $18,000 into an account? And then, obviously Crockett gets pissed because you're running my people. And he says, I'm doing research. I want to know who I'm working with,
right.
Well as Crockett did that
to him
Crockett too, even though,
Tubbs, yeah.
So at one point Crockett then does confront Rodriguez on how he could afford to send one of his kids to a private school. It costs a lot of money. And then,
why don't you just ask me, Sonny?
And he said, all right, Lou, where'd you get the money? Mind your own business. None of your business type of stuff. Then we move on to the next scene. Trini DeSoto changes the plans on Teddy Prentice regarding where the drug buy was going to be, with running records, like, they didn't call it phone dumps back in that day, but where they ran the phone records. Sonny figures out that Wheeler is actually the leak.
Wheeler's the leak.
Prentice goes to meet Trini, and that's where Trini dressed up again as the female assassin, and basically backup arrives, and then in the end, Tubbs is the one that bags him. All right, then we move on to the next scene, and that's where Crockett goes to Wheeler's house to confront him about the payouts. Wheeler starts going on about medical expenses for his son, mortgage payments, while only making $30,000 a year. And one of the things I noticed that I didn't notice probably way back when we watched it is that when you see that door open and Wheeler's family is having dinner, you could see, very indistinctly, but you could see young child sitting in a wheelchair. So that's what, they set that tone for when he does make that confession. How much did he get bought out for, Mark?
$70K.
$70K just for information. But
just for information.
That's, again, where Crockett now feels betrayed by his old partner. And he said, you know what? Basically he's thinking, okay,
we had
$70,000 for information, but
for dinner.
People were killed over that.
36 grand in Scott Jr.'s medical expenses last year alone. Me clearing a lousy 30 a year. 6 months ago, a guy comes up to me outside of a club in Little Havana, hands me a suitcase. Says compliments of Mr. Calderon. Nothing else. Just compliments. Sonny.
How much? How much to buy you, Scotty?
70 grand. Information. That's all they wanted was information.
Information?
You gotta help me, man. You gotta help me, man. I got a family.
Where?
Man, I got 15
Where?
years as a stand-up cop. I got 2 medals of valor. I took a bullet for you, for God's sakes.
Am I missing something here or what, Scotty? I don't get it. I don't understand this. You were my partner. I had you and Donna and the kids over to dinner, 20 or 30 times? Thanksgiving, birthdays. I trusted you. I trusted you, you bastard! I trusted you! I trusted you!
his partner
Yes.
Eddie Rivera was killed, as well as Leon was killed, and everybody else that the Colombian left in his wake.
Being former firefighters, we've got that special bond. Cops obviously have that special bond. Just for information, well, no. People died because of that information
Right,
that you
and
made money off of.
right, and when you're talking about that relationship, it's even more critical as an undercover officer because you depend on each other's lives, especially if you're
Right.
working together, you're playing off each other. You know, they always have said in the first responder world that you could have, you know, two spouses, the spouse you're married to, and then that de facto one, which is your partner.
And then being undercover as they were, you depend on that veil of secrecy, that second, I don't want to say second family, but second identity, where you guys are playing off each other so you could complete your task at hand. This was the ultimate ripping the Band-Aid off the skin. Again, going back to $70,000 just for information. The information got people killed. And then they finally meet up with Calderon. And then at the standoff, Calderon orders Matarlo. I don't know if I'm saying it right.
Matarlo, which means, you know, kill them, because they knew the gig was up. They're grabbing onto a couple of his stooges. They weren't there for a buy. They were there to make the bust because they knew Calderon knew because of Scott Wheeler. So the gig was up. This is where the climax of the show is, and this is very, very crucial stopping point for Ricardo Tubbs because now he's got the double barrel shotgun pointed at Calderon, who goads him by taunts him by calling him a $400 a week cop. And
shoot me. Go ahead. Shoot me. It's illegal.
Go ahead, shoot me. Get over.
It's against
and then
the law.
Right. And then, you know, he starts edging that trigger finger, and Calderon's like, "Oh, this guy's for real here.
Right.
He doesn't give a shit that he's a $400 cop."
Come on, you $400 a week cop. It's getting late. Gonna arrest me now. Not gonna shoot me, are you? It's against the law. It's against the law.
This is where we notice that Tubbs has, you know, there's one more flashback about his brother. And then I'm assuming that's where Calderon finally figures this is real. He'll probably do it. And then finally Crockett intervenes.
Right. And I don't think that Calderon ever knew or made a connection between Ricardo Tubbs and Raphael Tubbs.
Right.
Because to him, killing Raphael was just another day at the office, just doing business.
Exactly. Right.
And so now they make this arrest of Calderon, and they're waiting to transfer to jail. They ended up going down to pick him up so they can make their transfer. And some judge springs him, lets him go. And again, he probably had somebody on his back pocket or on his payroll. So now you're getting Crockett and Tubbs racing to the airport in the Spider, you know, but they arrive too late. Calderon's on a plane. And that biplane is on the way out to the water, and then it's airborne after that. For right now, Calderon is gone, but as we'll see
for now,
later on, he does return.
So finally, at the end, we see Tubbs and Crockett driving away, and then the line comes up. Tubbs, ever consider a career in Southern law enforcement?
And he's like, yeah, you know what? Maybe. And that's basically where
was born.
Yep, partnership was born, exactly.
Tubbs, you ever consider a career in Southern law enforcement?
Maybe.
And with that, we'd like to bring this episode of Vice of Miami podcast to a close. Mark and I appreciate each and every one of you listening, and especially Kenny from MASH 477th podcast for helping and guide us on how to get this podcast started. You can check out his and Simon's podcast at MASH 477 podcast on all of your podcast platforms. We hope you enjoy what we have to offer. Please spread the word about us, and we will see you next time for Vice of Miami Podcast Episode 3, where we discuss Miami Vice Season 1, Episode 2, Heart of Darkness.